giving it to you, accept and maintain. May I taste the truth of the Tathagata's words. Good morning. I don't know if anybody's new to Stone Creek, but if you are, welcome. And my name is Dojin, or Sarah. Either is good. And I use the pronouns she or her. And I'm one of the head priests at Stone Creek. And to begin with today, I just wanted to take a moment to recognize how long it's been that we've been in this weird situation. And I've been thinking about that. I've been thinking about the tremendous resilience that we all exhibit in our ability to adapt and how quickly we adapt to things as human beings. It's an amazing skill, or it's an amazing capacity that we have as human beings to adapt to difficult or changing circumstances, and to recognize this is weird and hard, and that to have so many people, I mean, we're all having our individual or familial or smaller in crises, but then there's this collective crisis, and to have so many people negotiating a crisis simultaneously is possibly unprecedented. Not that there haven't been pandemics before, but to be aware of one another at the way we are because of the way we're connected. It's super stressful. And just to acknowledge that, we may have adapted and we may have found some ways that we even appreciate what's happening. Or I keep hearing like, well, introverts are fine. And I can say like, I'm an introvert and I'm struggling. And I know that I'm not alone in that. And I think any of us that have any kind of mental health issues, that they're amplified, and many people's financial strains are amplified. And yeah, I just wanted to begin with, even though this is our new normal, reminding us that it's not normal, and that what's being asked of us as human beings and as like a collective body of humanity is extremely challenging. Yeah, and to appreciate our resilience in it. I've been stepping back a little bit and thinking of like, why am I in it in terms of the Dharma? What is it? Why am I here? Why do I practice? Why do I invest my life in this practice? Why do I want to teach this? And the word that keeps coming for me is healing. What I'm interested in as a human being is healing, and healing on all levels, including the karma of our nation, and healing in the realms of suffering. What is actually transformational, and what is curative, or what is antidote, or what meets suffering in a way that is transformative and healing. And there's this expression, or there's a practice, I think, in the Jewish tradition about which I don't know very much, so I'll acknowledge that. And I only heard it, I've heard it used in certain different places, and I'm probably not even going to pronounce it right. So if you know how to say it, please let me know. But it looks like tikkun olam, to heal the world, or repair the world, or repair creation. I've heard about it in several different places, and including the movie about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, where and where it came up there was that after 9/11, he came out of retirement to do I think it was like like a public health message on the TV, and he talked about this concept of repairing creation, repairing the world. And when I've read a little bit about it since, from Jewish scholars, it's the way that it's being used now has really been only used that way since the 60s or 70s. It's an old concept that's been kind of appropriated to our times, but to this concept of to be human and to exist in this world, are what we're here to do is to help repair and to help heal. And so that concept comes to my mind a lot. And then I think a lot about what it means to be human, what it means to be a Buddhist practitioner in relation to that whole concept. Why Buddhism in the face of the tremendous suffering that's just happening to us on so many levels. And last time I talked, I was talking about, I kind of want to continue the themes, but I was talking about Sangha as a verb. That was an article written by Sebene Salesi. But that idea of relating and Sangha-ing, that we take refuge in the effort that we make toward relationship in the Dharma. And that itself is actually curative and healing momentum, and that's an effort that we make that's healing in the world. And as I've been thinking about that over the last month or so, a kind of simple formula has come forward for me, and that I wanted to offer. And it's kind of I'm going to offer a dualism, sorry, but it's one that it really is alive for me, which is that as human beings, and really, I mean, like most human beings I've ever met, we have a capacity at any moment to move from a vantage point of isolation, separation, and the delusion of separate self. So coming from separation, or we can make the effort to come from the vantage point of connection. In our tradition, or in the Buddhist tradition, a lot of this is often translated as emptiness. We come from a place of emptiness, of understanding emptiness. That is the same concept that Thich Nhat Hanh calls interbeing. I feel like when Lian Schutt was talking a couple weeks ago, she was talking about, if we look at Indra's net, we look at, as bodhisattvas, if we are bodhisattvas practitioners, we want to look at the net, not just focus on the jewels, the individual jewels. We hold in our hearts and in our conception, and actually in where we're coming from, the ground we stand on, we hold this conception of how, even though we think that we're separate from each other, we know there's something bigger than that. And that's this a conception of the net that ties us, and the ways that our actions affect one another, and the ways that we are made out of one another. We're made out of these connections. We're made out of relationship. We're made out of all these contingencies and conditions. So essentially what's come down as a practice for me is that in any moment, especially when I'm feeling confused, I've been holding up, right now, can I come from the place of relationship? Can I come from a place of connection? And often that opens my capacity and my heart a little bit. And in the class that Corinne and I are leading collaboratively with Lian and another teacher, Dalila Bothwell, we're looking at race and anti-racism as a practice, and we're looking at that through the lens of the Eightfold Path. So, you all may, for those who have heard about the Eightfold Path, so it's the fourth noble truth. The first is there is suffering. The second is there's a cause. The third is there is a path, and the fourth is here's the path. And we traditionally, or I've heard it in English mostly called right view, right thought, right speech, right action, right effort, right mindfulness, right livelihood, right concentration. We've been really using, instead of using the word right, we are using the term skillful. And this is a really helpful lens, I think. What is skillful view? What is skillful action? And what supports skillful view and skillful action? I like that so much better than right, because right sounds like, it's finished. Whereas skillful encourages us to so in this moment, what's skillful? And for me, this duality actually, or holding up this question of, am I coming from a place of the delusion of isolation, or am I coming from a place of relationship and connection, helps steer me toward a more skillful, view and a more skillful capacity to meet what's happening, more skillful thinking, and hopefully more skillful action. There are a number of, I would say, pretty big obstacles to standing in the ground of relationship that I experience. The first is that when we are in a state of overwhelm, and neuroscience and psychology also show us this too, when we're in a state of overwhelm, we are naturally inclined to oversimplify. And, you know, like if any of you have had traumatic experiences, you literally get tunnel vision. You literally cut off from complexity, and the brain as an adaptive thing gets narrow and says like only focus because your survival's at stake. And there are traumatic instances that are vivid and obvious, and then there is like kind of almost like the everyday overwhelm and trauma of feeling like everything's too much, you know. And lately, for many of us that are in Northern California, there's the everyday tax on our nervous system of the smell of smoke and the fear of evacuation, and like this is a normal, I think it's a pretty innate human response that our nervous systems are activated and heightened. And for many people that I encounter in the United States, that a little like a patina of overwhelm has become normative, and so that the nervous system's often taxed, and so we defer to something simpler. And the delusion of separation is simpler. It's not real, but it's graspable, it's simpler, and it's familiar. You know, I would say particularly in the United States, it's in my experience of being acculturated in the United States, with individualism being so prized, that this the delusion of isolation and separation is literally formative in my acculturation here in this country, and my view of myself and of other people, actually. A second obstacle, I think, to living in relationship is, and again, for me, this comes strongly in my acculturation in the United States, is denial, and the strong currents of denial that I experience in my upbringing, and I hear from others when we talk about the history that they have or that we share. I heard this really neat commentary recently by a kind of a scholar in the world of fantasy literature and science fiction and horror. And this person was saying that, you know, that in the United States, ghost stories are horror stories. And they were looking at that through the lens of kind of a socio-political commentary, which is that for white dominant culture, looking back on history is like, has this terrifying aspect that ghosts and those who are dead are seen as frightening. And to me, that describes something that I had in my upbringing, which was like, we don't look backwards, we look forward. And what's back there is, it's gone, it's in the past, I'm not accountable for it, and probably kind of scary, actually. and that holding that an American version of ghost story is kind of an amplification of this. And he's Puerto Rican, the guy that was talking. His name is Daniel Jose Older, and he was talking about how in his culture, ancestor connection is actually a deep current, and how people kind of adapted Catholicism to include these older ways of having ancestor relationship, and did that very skillfully so that they could keep these older pieces of culture, and that ghosts or those who are behind us or in the past are actually guides, and they're people that were in relationship. And in many cultures, you know, and the people in my life who come from different parts of Asia, there's many cultures have like a built-in ancestor worship or veneration and connection. And the the Day of the Dead, which is like, you know, in the United States, one of, I would say, like our most, in white culture, like the most recent appropriated holiday, because I think but it speaks to something that's missing for many white Americans in particular, which is a connection with ancestry and the past. And so that kind of cutting off of the past also means that we cut off, for those of us who are acculturated this way, we cut off having a sense of like where we come from and what shapes us and how we got here. And that makes it really difficult to live in the complexity that is relationship and relationality. So it's not just with one another, but with conditions and with history. And I think the third thing that can be really challenging around standing in the complexity of relationship and connectedness is it's ungraspable. This is, I think Corinne and I often talk about the image from the Genjo koan of like, you only see as far as your eye can reach, you know, your eye of practice can reach. You see a circle of water. And if we're coming from that place of separation, we think the circle of water is the whole deal. But when we stand on the ground of reality of how things are connected, we still just see the circle of water, but we know it's a circle of water, and we know it's not the whole ocean. And we know that we abide in an ocean. It's the same thing of like, we know that we abide in that great vast net. I was thinking about how, but it's ungraspable, it's inconceivable. The complexity of what makes any one of us and any conditioned thing. Even our thoughts are actually like vastly complicated in their conditioning. And we certainly can't know all the conditions. So I think as bodhisattvas, we're asked to like, can you live though from a place of holding something wider than what you can conceive of? And in the Genjo koan too, Dogen points to this in saying, when Dharma does not fill your whole body and mind, you think it is already sufficient. You think you've got a handle on it. When Dharma fills your body and mind, you understand that something is missing. So when we're coming from the vantage point of Dharma, we are coming from an understanding there is so much beyond my perception. But I was thinking about how, if I look at my acculturation again, just to use myself as an example, and I, you know, as I look at the grid of all your dear faces, I know, and having conversations with many of you, that a lot of this acculturation is shared, that we come from a dominant culture that says, you have to know the facts, you know, get your facts straight. And actually, as I was thinking about that terminology and that feeling, or when I've encountered that in my life, like, get the facts straight. Although I do realize that collectively that's becoming shaky ground, the facts. That I was realizing that the word that comes to my mind is like a kind of viciousness. There's a kind of viciousness that I experience and have always experienced in our culture, or not our, maybe, because maybe some of us have been spared this, but in dominant culture, as I experience it, there's this harshness that's like, that actually points to what I think Charlie was in part pointing to when he was talking last week about the wound that he carries, which is like, there isn't a collective sense of living beings having inherent value. Your value is all the stuff on the outside. You know, what's your job, and what do you know? What do you know? And what do you own? And what's your net worth? And these external evaluations that are always reminding those of us that are acculturated that way, like, you don't matter. The stuff around you matters, and the facts matter, and just how harsh that is for a human being. You know, that if the dominant culture could come from a place of relationship, and that the humility that comes with understanding how connected we are, I don't think that we would treat each other that way. I hope not. You know, and I feel like this is what Dharma practice offers, is a possibility that we stand in that kind of humility of like, what we are is vast beyond our knowing. What I am is vast beyond my knowing. What you are is vast beyond my knowing. And thusly, I hold this encounter as a treasure, you know, It's very different than like, what do you got over there? And what's in it for me? You know, and the cruelty of that. And that kind of harshness is on my mind a lot as I watch people, as I watch our country sliding toward this election. That and understand and begin and you know, I've been contemplating and like opening more and more to the forces of really deliberate division that are at play in our collective society in this country. For those, I wonder if anyone has seen the movie The Social Dilemma, about it's about social media and its impact on basically on the collective psychology of people, particularly in the United States, and where you see it dovetail with individualism, but it's in other countries as well. The unintended consequences of these amazing technologies. One thing that was said that just like broke my heart, but also was relieving in the way that it named something true, was that it's a whole, and especially for younger people who are like weaned now on social media as a form of human connection, is that the foundational principle is manipulation and addiction. That's the ground for all this social engagement. I think for those of us who, you know, developed before all this stuff, it looks weird, and you know, but what they're seeing is the way that this is shaping humanity. And there are some folks who are, and this movie is about people from within the industry calling for moral reckoning and correction, and a course correction, like how we, and regulation around this. And it feels to me so resonant with what's happening in our country, which is like, you know, we are collectively needing a moral reckoning with what's gotten us here to this place that we are. And still we have to work as Americans, we have to, or people in the United States, we have to work with these conditions that are here for us. And division and the kind of, and the deliberate amplification of division is one of the things that we have to work with. I was talking to a younger priest recently who grew up in the Midwest and would like to go home and visit their family there. Except they're afraid about how incensed they'll be with all the conversations that they would anticipate having in their family, where there's a lot of people that support President Trump and they don't. Or even, they were even worried about seeing signs in yards and stuff like that. And so we were looking at that dilemma for that person in the light of Dharma. And what we found ourselves coming to is, you know, as bodhisattvas, we can hold with deep compassion living beings who are not supported to come from a place of relationship. We can also hold with deep compassion living beings who don't have the support to understand that to not interrupt harm is actually really bad karma. You know, to support people who perpetuate harm in the world is actually really bad karma. And as bodhisattvas who care about living beings, we can extend that compassion. Like, we can be grateful if we're able to come from a place of relationship and understand, like, well, I can't support these people perpetuating harm because they're harming themselves. Even the karma, the karmic holes they're digging for themselves are creating hell realms right here in our sphere already. You know, and that's not super remote. Actually, it can feel that way in any given moment when someone's in your face. You know, I was doing texting to voters in Georgia this weekend to just help people get to resources to vote by mail in Georgia, and I got a text back that said, you know, F you and Stacey Abrams. And it was painful to read it, although I was also like, wow, I just got grouped with Stacey Abrams. That's awesome. But I also was like, whoa, it's harsh. You know, it's harsh to have somebody, they didn't say F you, they said the whole word. There it was, you know, like, but I really did. I paused and I was like, and I just felt into the pain of that division that that person was offering. And then I challenged myself to feel into my connection with this person. You know, on a Saturday morning, here we were encountering one another through texts. And could I offer them well-being, actually? Could I care for them at all? Could I find that in myself to be like, oh, I am sorry that another person said, sorry, I have to chuckle just a little bit because to me this like literally doesn't make any sense. They were like, people should vote in person like a patriot. Patriots vote in person. I was like, okay. Patriots protect the right to vote. In my understanding of patriotism, they protect democracy. I could just watch my mind go to like, thousands of people have died protecting this country and this democracy, right? They have gone into military service and have lost their lives and have given their lives to protect democracy. And you're going to tell me that cutting people off from a capacity to vote is a patriotic thing to do? Sorry. And then again, like, can I stand in a kind of loving regard that does not dehumanize a person that has that conception? Can I understand some of the conditions? That's why last night I was like, Charlie, we need to watch The Social Dilemma, because I knew a part of the content. And like, can I understand that that person is arising out of conditions that are different, first of all, that are different than the ones that I arise out of, and secondly, are not being supported to live in the reality of how they're connected with one another, you know. But to support people to vote from home who might not be able to otherwise is actually an active relationship and protection of one another. So what I want to do is offer a practice that helps us to stay in a relationship and to stay in connection, and talk a little bit about it and then do it a little bit together before we finish, which is the practice of metta. It's often translated as loving kindness. And I think, again, like given the kind of cynicism that individualism promotes, you lose a lot of people who are acculturated in the United States right there. It's like, ugh, loving kindness. So I think it might be good to think about some other translations. Metta, I think, is a super powerful practice. It's the practice of it is love. It's based in love, but not a fluffy kind, you know, a fierce and effortful kind. The kind of love that actually keeps us grounded in relationship to all things, and keeps us even grounded in relationship to the disparate parts that we carry within ourselves. And when I've heard people be like, metta practice has nothing to do with Zen. I'm like, well, first of all, it's a foundational Buddhist practice. It's the oldest meditation we know of in Buddhism, or that is recorded anyway. It's foundational, and to cultivate it actually I experience it as a practice of non-duality. And Zen practice is the practice of non-duality. And the duality, and it works with a number of dualities that we have set up. The first one is self and others, or self and world. It challenges us in the practice, and I'll describe what the practice is for those who haven't encountered it before. But it challenges us to disrupt being stuck in a sense of isolation and separation and apartness from the world. Another thing that it challenges is an idea of kind of the hierarchy of value of others. So the practice is that we begin by generating a sense of unconditional loving regard and kind of cherishing of ourself. And we extend it to people that it's easy for us to open our hearts to. And then we extend it to people who are neutral or who we have no emotional investment in. And we extend it to people who are hard for us to open our hearts to or difficult. And then we go out from there. This is working with a fundamental Buddhist concept of Vedana, that like all things are positive, negative, or neutral. There's a cast, there's like a valence in every moment and every thought and every dharma of positive, negative, neutral. We move toward it, away from it, or we have confusion and ambivalence about it, or neutrality about it. So the cultivation of this practice is literally asking us to not get stuck in thinking that there are certain people that are worthy of our loving attention and cherishing, and that there are others who are not. And I, for myself, I mean, I mention this often because it's a big part of my acculturation. You know, I grew up in New England, and that Robert Frost, you know, that the Robert Frost quote of "good fences make good neighbors." This is a physical sensation I have of my childhood. You know, people being in their own little pods. You've got your home and your fence, and like the people inside your house, they're the ones you love. People outside of that, you don't have any responsibility for. You know, it challenges that acculturation. And I think also we can utilize it in this very particularly Zen way, which is we challenge a conception of when we do dedications in Zen, every time we do a service, we say all Buddhas, 10 directions 3 times. So when we do that, we're kind of exploding our sense of location as being something so tight. We're saying may the benefit of our efforts go out in all directions, up and down and all around, and also backward and forward in time to the past, present, and future. May there be benefit. And that's another way, again, of just, it's not that we can know how our benefit goes backwards and forward in time or up and down in space, but that's our intention. And every time we make that offering, we're relocating ourselves on the ground of not being separate. And also we're relocating ourselves on the ground of the ungraspable reality of connectedness. So Zazen practice itself, I think, is really a tremendous gift to us in this time of division. So just when we do meditation, or just when we're sitting in Zazen practice, we're really growing our capacity to stay with what is, to open to discomfort, you know, and to be present for whatever's arising. So it's like from there, we can bring in metta practice. And again, especially in times when we are activated, when our nervous systems are taxed, when things are difficult, I find these more enumerated practices to be super helpful tools. And I know, you know, we're not supposed to be graspy, but we do need these tools of the tradition. There's a reason why they persisted for thousands of years. It's because they're useful and they're powerful. So, so maybe we can just, it'll just be about 5 minutes. I do know that a lot of Zen people don't like guided meditations. I've heard that feedback, and I understand it. And we're not, maybe for those of us who are really grounded in Zazen, we're not used to it. Like, shh, you know, I'm doing Zazen. But I like to offer this as a guided meditation. You do not need to do it if you don't want to. Or another possibility is if you really don't want to, you can use me as the person that you're irritated with when we get to that place. And offer me loving kindness. The person is making you do this thing you don't want to do. So let's just try together. I really do. I want to just offer it as a possibility for us. This will be maybe a 5-minute version of it. And you can bring it into Zazen practice sometimes in the beginning or the end. You can also find ways to kind of make it a micro version of it in your day, where you notice that path opening between separation and relationship. You can just pull in a little, can I stay on this ground of metta? So if for those of us who'd like to do it, let's just get started by coming into the body, maybe closing your eyes because we don't need the visual field of all the little squares. And actually locating ourselves in our physical body. And this part, I've heard the feedback from many people. This part may cause anxiety, but just see if you can do it. The effort is to call forth a sensation in your heart of unconditional and loving regard toward yourself. It can help to think, there are people in your life who have offered that to you, you can bring them to mind. They don't need to be living. They don't need to be human. Sometimes if we think of the loving regard of a pet, It is unbounded. It is this kind of thing where we are loved no matter what. But the challenge is we have to offer it to ourselves. That's the anchor of this practice. It is the essential ingredient of this practice. And right there, we are challenging a duality of any teachings we have had that we are not worthy of love. We ground ourselves in cherishing our own life and our own being and our own survival and our own joy, even, and sense of comfort. May we be well. May I be well. And then, if we can ground there, or when we can ground there, call to mind somebody for whom it's easy to love. Again, it may be human or non human, it may be someone living or not living. Someone for whom our love is not complicated, it just flows easily, at least today. And fully call them to mind. And really see if you can picture the benefit of your well wishing toward them. May they be well. May they be protected. May they be at ease. May they be joyful. May they benefit from our cherishing. And then we call to mind somebody who's neutral. And this is challenging. This can also be challenging. You can think of a public figure that you don't have any emotional valence around, someone you pass on the street. Our minds are so quick to make determinations and opinions that it's hard to find somebody that's really, really neutral. But see if you can. Or at least someone that has very little emotional resonance for you. And then the challenge is to take this great treasure of the warmth of your cherishing and extend it to this relatively unknown person. May they be well. May they be protected. May they benefit from this loving attention we give to them now. And if we can find stability there, we open out to someone who's challenging. And again, this is not someone who's caused us tremendous harm, especially if we're unfamiliar with this practice. We begin with someone who's mildly irritating. This can be someone that we usually cherish very much, but they've pissed us off recently, or they've made us feel badly. And it's challenging for the heart to open right now to them. And then again, we call on the deep resources of our practice and the love that we have, and we extend it to them. May they be well. May they feel deeply cherished in this world. May they benefit by our loving intention. May they be joyful. May they be supported to feel the connection with others and move from a place of relationship. And then for a few breaths, as much as you have the energy for, And be selective about this, because that the difficult person may be plenty. But if you feel this stability there, you can just open up the sphere of impact of your loving regard. Picture that like a pebble that dropped in a pond, and it's just rippling outward. To the people, your neighbors, people in your town, people in the state. Also to animals, also to non-human and non-animal beings. To air beings and water beings and mountain beings and space beings, and just as far as out as you want, let it ripple out. To the edges maybe of our atmosphere. Maybe there are moon beings who need our loving regard. Beings beyond our conception. Beings deep in the earth. And then, if you're stable here, reach back in time to some long ago person from whom you are descended. May your deep intention be a benefit for them. May some burden they carry be liberated in your turning your loving regard to them, even without knowing them. And if you can find stability here, reach forward in time to a being that doesn't have to be your biological descendant, it's your karmic descendant. There are people that will come generations from now who will be on the receiving end of decisions that we've made. Picture them and extend this loving regard. May my actions and my choices and my thoughts and my words somehow be of benefit to them. May someday they feel the warmth of this loving regard, and may it help, and may it heal. And just pause at these far reaches, the heart extended out. And then, and this part's really important, even if you're doing it in a quick version, try not to skip this. Turn your attention around and come all the way back through every being you've pictured. In the future, in the past, the far reaches of the earth, coming closer in, through the person whom it's difficult to open to, through the neutral person, through the beloved person, now back to ourselves. And if it's useful, you can even maybe put your hand on your heart. And now this loving regard is flavored with not being so bounded by duality and separation. And now again, we offer it to ourselves. May I be well. May I be protected. May I cherish my own life so that I may offer loving regard to others. May I locate myself here in all my words, in all my thoughts, in all my actions. you all very much. So if you like, I welcome any comments or thoughts or inquiries or reflections.
Sarah,
Yes.
I have a question for you, and you don't have to answer it if you feel uncomfortable answering it. But when you texted with this person in Georgia, did they know you were a priest, or did they know that you had any sort of a background that might make them reflect about to whom they were speaking or to whom they were addressing this profanity?
I'm actually touched that you think that would help or have changed it. I don't know. I think, no, I was doing it through the organization Fair Fight. And so the text, and so it's actually this, it's a kind of, speaking of like wonders of technology, you know, it's like, I'm not even really doing it through it is through my phone, but like they can't see my phone number. It just comes, it's generated through the organization itself. It says, hi, this is Sarah from volunteering with Fair Fight Action. And so they, you know, that allows them actually to, I'm almost anonymous to them, right? So I'm fairly dehumanized, which I think we could factor in, that they really, and I also, I've been doing this to a number of states, Georgia and Florida among them, where you can tell people are so tired of getting phone calls. So anyone in any swing state is like, I think is pretty much fed up with getting barraged by phone calls and texts. And so that's part of where they're coming from, you know. But again, I don't think it would have helped to be like, hey, I'm a Buddhist priest.
Well, I was just thinking in terms of respect and so forth, and I know that maybe this is just a generalization, but I think that if somebody was being whatever you want to call it to a priest, or if they knew they were a priest, they might act differently and show a different sense of respect.
But I think that's a great, I'm glad you're bringing it up, because I think it's a great measure for us that we would think there's different levels, you know. However you mean being respectful to a priest, that should be everybody, you know. We should all hold that toward everybody. We could engage with everyone as like, you know, not even a priest, because, you know, like, I'm not that good. but, you know, like as a teacher, as a beloved, every being. Thank you, you know, encountering each other that way. It sounds, you know, I don't know, I think it sounds woo-woo, but it really, Bodhisattva practice calls us to do that. You know, metta practice, in the Metta Sutta, you know, just as a mother watches over and protects her only child, so with a boundless mind should all living beings cherish, should we cherish all living beings, above, below, and all around without limit. So let one cultivate an infinite goodwill toward all the whole world. It's pretty clear. Thank you. Are there other thoughts? Yeah, Donna.
Well, I just want to thank you. I am one of those people who started my practice with guided meditation and then now delved into the Soto Zen. And so I resist it a lot and can become impatient with it, especially if it goes on too long. I think, and this was just fantastic. Thank you. And I also simplified metta practice. So and I didn't understand it. So this guided meditation really worked for me very, very well. And I want to thank you for that. Yeah, so that's all. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming along on the journey. I think there are many depths to metta practice that don't always get represented, maybe. And how it supports Zen practice and bodhisattva vows, actually. Yeah, I feel like it could just be enumerated over and over. It's one of those, like any good practice, the depths of it are just subtler and subtler and deeper and deeper. So thank you.
Dojin, thank you. Thank you so much. That was really, really wonderful. I definitely enjoyed the metta practice, and also just your words that you know, a lot of people are not supported by the conditions of their lives. And I think when we start to think about that, that's when judgment erodes. And that's where we can, I think, enter into non-dual thinking. I think about that all the time when I am upset by what's going on in the world. I fall back onto that thought and rest on that, because it just helps me. It kind of helps dissipate anger and frustration and all of those feelings that we do not want. So yeah, it's super profoundly helpful for me to think in those terms. So thank you so much. Really enjoyed your talk.
Thank you, Vicki. Yeah, I think one of the things we can think about as practitioners is what, you know, we can offer compassion for folks who are not supported to see in a wider view, and we can think also and amplify and nurture and nourish the parts of our lives that do support us. You know, like what in my life helps me stay on this ground? What in my life like propels me off of this ground? You know, and for myself, I can see panic and fear, anger too, but really fear is more likely to make me go, pew, you know, off of my ground of relationship. And so metta practice is a good, like I just recommend it the next time you find yourself in a state of overwhelm like that, like a panicky thing. It's a very grounding thing. So it can feel like we just do it so we're nice to other people, but I wish I had it. I'm sorry that I didn't remember to find it this week, but I've seen there's been this a kind of a meta study, like science meta, so like they brought together results from people that were being clinically studied doing meta practice, and it's like, you know, there's an increase in your immune system, there's a decrease in stress hormones, there's all these, so it's like, and again, it disrupts this idea that what's personally beneficial is has to be separate from what's beneficial in relation to the world. It's like, this is actually, it's just a field of mutual benefit to be grounded in metta practice.
Yeah.
Dojin,
Yes.
I was wondering how, I mean, I like the idea of extending this feeling through the metta practice, the feeling of connection and everything. I'm wondering how, because I know it's not good, to prevent oneself from sliding into a feeling of pity for people, like that
Yeah,
you are working from this thing where, you know, you're right spiritually. And
totally.
and it, yeah, and that slips so easily into feeling like, you know, you're pitying somebody.
No, I really appreciate that question, Holly, because I think so like there's a flavor of separation and individualism that the more to me, like it's just been such a strong practice for me lately that I'm like, I can feel it. Pity is separating, so you can feel it. You feel the distance, and it's higher. It's from the engine of supremacy. It puts you up and somebody else down. So one of our efforts is, and that's the thing I think that I want to also say is, we will fall into the delusion of separation because when we're tired, when we're overwhelmed, when we're exhausted, when we're beaten down by things, you know, because to be in relationship is effortful. It's not our first language of being human, actually, if we think of it that way. You know, for those of us that I spoke English when I grew up, but I spoke English with a Boston accent. When I get tired, it slides out. It's hilarious. I don't deliberately not do it. It's just, but I can see that, and I can see, you know, friends who are bilingual that like when they get tired, they start to think in their original language, if English was their second language. So similarly here, we will fall into it, but we look for that flavor of separation, and pity is never a skillful feeling. And I think we, whenever we notice it, feel into what it feels like, because what it feels like is separation. And usually my experience is there's fear that generates it again. We want to feel like we could never be what that person is. And that's where pity comes from. So find that, you know, using our discernment between compassion and pity. And it's effortful, because that overlay of competition and individualism will ask us to do a hierarchical thing that that not everyone, but for many of us who are acculturated in dominant culture, that request is always there. Put yourself up or down, put yourself up or down.
Thank you.
Okay.
I had, oh,
Oh yes, one more.
just, well, for some reason in the middle of the night, I was holding these very hostile feelings toward the crucifix, Jesus on a cross with nails bolted. And I, it's, won't go into that, but what was interesting about the meta was that when you guided us toward reaching for an ancestor, Jesus is who came up.
Oh,
Is my ancestor. So that was very important. Transformational.
yeah, and maybe the next time, like everyone who has used that image as an oppressive thing, the image of the crucifix has been used as an oppressive tool in this world. We can include them as ancestors that we all have to work with, religious or not. That kind of Christian oppression is a real part of the world that we have inherited and we live in now. Great. Thank you all very much. If there's more that comes up, or if you find other questions particularly about metta practice, I was thinking about doing a class, but it's hard to find a time that really works. And so we just wanted to do it on Sunday, but please reach out if there's more clarification, or even if you're trying it out, like, how's it going? I'd love to hear. Is the closing? Yeah, the closing chant is also in the chat. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma things I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is boundless. I vow to realize.